Hello. So, walking down the same street I've walked down 100 times now, down to my gym. And so I thought I would share some thoughts on what I have learned so far from running my own startup, IT startup to be specific, because hey, this is about my life as a programmer, right? So, to give you a little bit of a background, and first letting the guys pass, I swear, every day. Anywho, so in essence, the startup that I run is, it started out as something very different, but today it's an iOS application with a Firebase backend, and the idea behind the app is basically to not give away too much, because my colleagues, in all their infinite greed and wisdom, want to keep these things secret as much as possible, because, and also make sure that we don't do any of the things that would make sense, like trying to find more programmers or anything like that. And we try to avoid that as best as possible, so that our shares can stay as big as possible. I like I tell these are nice guys. I like to tell myself that they have a healthy amount of greed, but I keep coming back to saying that what their share, I don't remember how much it is, but something like 50%, let's just say for sake, 50% of nothing is still 50% of nothing. So I think we should probably start with doing things that get the project to a point where you can actually build an entire business of it. But we're getting close. So the background of the project is basically that you have an application that will help you in asking fairly standardized questions about certain topics. So you take an image, like you take a picture of something for whatever reason, and then you have prepared questions such as, do you like this, and that type of stuff, or comparisons. Which one of these two images, depending with with the description and stuff like that, and then you send that out to your network of people, and they are given a notification saying that, hey, Frederick wants you to want some help answering this question for him. And then they can, from a standardized platform that's optimized to very quickly be able to give you feedback, they can give you feedback. And you might ask, what's the use case for this? Well, apart from helping you deciding between two things, or knowing how people feel about something, and the first question we have is suggestions, such as you can actually upload associated images to one image. So let's say that you have a piece of clothing or something like that, and you want to know if there are any accessories that your friends can suggest, or if they this is a piece of clothing you like, and you want to know if somebody has better suggestions, then they can upload their suggestions to what would fit better. That's the idea of the platform, to kind of take a stab at creating a feedback system for people who want to ask a question about something. And specifically, it's optimized for questions around purchases or that type of stuff. That's the idea, basically. And when I started this project, I was scouted out when I was still in the university, and in essence my teacher came up to me and said that I have these two guys and they have an app idea, and they basically need somebody who can build the whole thing. And I thought, cool, I'm just starting out, and it could be a pretty interesting project to start working on, because I wanted to do something that was bigger than your average little CRUD application or Hello World or whatever. I wanted to do something that, was big enough for me to develop. So I met with them and they pitched me the idea, and they had absolutely no money, and I said, that's fine, I don't care so much about money, I'm just interested to see if I can build this and I have like a technical interest. But I was also very clear on, I don't care if this makes it or not. I don't care if it becomes a big successful company or if it never makes it. I'm just in it for the tech and like solving this problem. Said and done. I started working on it, and the first iteration or the proof of concept was an Angular application for the web with a Java backend using the Spring Boot framework actually, and Neo4j as a graph database. Now, to be when we first started, like the direction was a certain thing, and we built this, and then we made it to the finals of a competition down here in Gothenburg called Venture Cup, which was pretty cool. And yeah, then as time went along, I transitioned the application or rewrote it using Docker and microservices in Node, because that was all the 6 at that point in time. And once I had done that, of course, I realized like a few years later that this microservices thing requires from me as a single developer a lot of overhead knowledge. I need to learn a lot of stuff, and it's great for my personal development, but it's not that great for actually making headway on the project. And there was just more and more stuff being added to the things I had to do to make the system work rather than just writing code. So I finally decided, after talking to some of my colleagues, that hey, maybe microservices isn't a great idea for like a single server with a single client application. Said and done. We move over to I move over to Firebase, and at this point we've already discussed, because to give you a little bit of a context, like these guys have been all over the map. I mean, this idea we have now, it didn't start out as this thing. It mutated into what it is today over time, because I jokingly tell them that I think you're afraid of releasing this application, because every time we get close to releasing it to the public, you change your mind about something, because they completely change. Like, I mean, we went from a web application to an iOS application, and then originally it was a product-oriented system for purchases, and now it's something else, So what I've learned so far from doing this is that when you start, like, if you want to make a company out of something, and that's probably the biggest lesson learned, apart from you need to be invested in the product yourself, and you need to do it for more than, I mean, I'm in it for the technical innovation, and at this point most of the technical challenges are gone. It's still a nice, interesting project, but it's not at what it was to begin with. Originally it posed a really interesting problem, but now it's very boilerplate in comparison to what it was. And so I find it harder and harder to stay motivated in actually building things. I still do, but it doesn't come as easy as it did 4 years ago, or 3 years or something like that. And I told my colleagues on the project this very early. If you want this to make it, you need to find like entrepreneur programmers. I'm not one of those. I don't care about the business, which is a bad thing, because what you want is people who want to build a company, and I'm just not that person, not yet anyway. So that means that you won't see me, like, my interest in the project will decay over time, because I'm not interested in the company that the project is built around. I'm interested in the technical part, and you get better and better, and sooner or later you find yourself in a situation where you know everything, and it's just the same old thing over and over again, which is where we are today. So it's lucky that we're pretty much on the end stretch for a lot of these things. So that's something that I found that's very important. Another thing that's fairly important is that you have how do I put it? Like you put a emphasis on, you prioritize the project over almost everything else. So I have been doing this part-time, and as you can imagine, it takes quite a lot of time to do that. You spend, you work full time, and then you get into a situation where you're almost working around the clock. You spend some time on the project, you spend some time on, and then you spend most of your time working on your regular job, and then you spend some time on the project. And the issue is that that you don't have enough energy for the most part, and you don't get as far as you need to get. You should know that for the most part, you're going, especially when you start a new company, unless you have, like, if you're really lucky and you have a great idea from the get-go, you're gonna build a perfect thing on first go. But we didn't do that. Like I don't think most companies do. I think that it's a guessing game. You kind of try some stuff out and see what works, and that takes time. And mistakes they cost time. I mean, the system today is fairly simple. Had I known what I know today, like a few years ago, I could have built the system in a fraction of the time, but it takes time for you to develop the idea to that point. So don't underestimate how many mistakes you're going to make along the way. And that's why it's important to kind of, for the most part, if you want to really go for it, you have to go for it. You have to, like, get investors and all that, or get some capital, and try, like, go full in for a little while at least, because when you do it like I do, it takes a lot of time to do it. So it becomes an endurance game. Now I have an uncommon amount of endurance, but very few people do. So you can keep on running it. And the people, like, I know I have a colleague who's been running his company for 10 years. So, like, it's not that it can't be done. It's just it takes a lot of time. And then I've met very inspiring people who have made something of themselves and their startup in just a few years, like 2 years. So, and I mean, their company is worth a lot. So it can go either way. But that's from my perspective what you need. You need people who are actually interested in the idea and not just something else around it, which is the case for me. Next thing is for, like, all your tech people, the technical side. You need to realize that if you are like me, then you're interested in technology and you want to play with the shiny tools and you want to try out the cool new tech that people are promoting on Google I/O and Facebook and like all these fancy things. But the problem is that what you're going to do is that you're going to slow down your project. In a startup, trust me, don't even think about unit tests and all that stuff unless your startup is about something extremely complex, like, I don't know, like trying to optimize bank transactions or optimize payment systems or something that requires a lot of technical, like, mathematics or whatever. If that's your case, then yes, you might need unit tests because you can't survive without them, but because accuracy is key for you. But otherwise, don't even do it. Like, go for release speed. Anything that can make you progress faster is worth it, because when you start out, you have a different situation than from what the people who are going to tell you about all the best practices have. Think about it from this perspective. Like, when I started, I made a single monolithic application when I started, and I made more headway in a month than I did in 6 months doing microservices. And the reason is because microservices at a large scale makes a lot of sense, because you have a lot of people who can maintain it, because you're in essence creating more complexity and more work for yourself and you trade that for a better, more robust system, a more maintainable system. The problem is, in my case, I mean, I applied this approach without thinking it through. I mean, I'm just a single guy, so for me, it made no, like, it didn't really make sense when I thought about it. I had to get a real good talking to from my colleagues to realize that it's the it's the right approach to solving a problem, but I don't have that problem. I have a different problem, and my problem wasn't like that I needed to do that. I just had to, like, maybe someday I would need to use microservices, but not now. And that's also something that's important to think about. Like, what stage of your in your process are you? What's your circumstances? If you're a single developer and you're trying to build your first thing that's going to be a product of some sort, then there's no reason for you to go fancy. Use something easy. Like, either make a monolith. Like, if you're using Java or .NET, just make a single monolithic application with a simple database. That should be enough. Like, focus on delivering features and value instead of getting bogged down in the tech and the architecture and getting all like programmatically philosophical. That was my biggest mistake. I'm pretty sure I set back the project by a lot by just making these mistakes. And that also ties into inexperience, in essence. Like, I read somewhere that it's vital that you have a senior developer on a project, because otherwise the project is doomed. Well, it's not doomed, but it's almost always doomed to fail. And I think that there is some logic in that, because younger developers are still in a situation where they try to, like, they go very fancy and they're still very passionate, and they don't have all that experience that is needed in order to know what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, what solution is a good solution now and what's going to be a good solution going forward. Because although microservices is at a large scale a good solution for a certain type of problem, when you don't understand that and you apply it without knowing when the right time to apply it is, then you just end up making things harder on yourself. And that's why I went over to like Lambda functions, or I do use Firebase, because it was very easy for me to get started. I could abstract away. Like, I mean, there are trade-offs, of course, but it increased my delivery speed by a lot, which means that the project could progress further. And if you think about it, if this simple solution gets me to a point where the project is making money, I can think about migration at a later stage. I mean, it might cost me more in the long run to do that, but if you think about the fact that it might, if I do it in another way, I mean, there's always a best way to do it, but at the end of the day, it feels to me like just getting something off the ground and getting it productive and like getting an income from it, that's more than half the battle. I mean, no, if you make something that's technologically really advanced and like really, people who read your code weep from joy, or the architecture is amazing, like, if it's not making you any money, or like, because that's in essence what you're trying to build, if it's not being used by anyone, then it doesn't have any value. It doesn't matter how perfect it is. So that's another good lesson to learn. I think that's pretty much it. Those are the major things I've learned so far. Oh, and one final thing as well. Make sure that you invest a lot of time in doing user tests and validating your idea, because trust me, if you're not having an active conversation about what to add into your application, and you are what we call like data-driven developers, or a data-driven company where you use your test groups to get feedback and knowing what to add in, then you're going to most likely build the wrong thing, which has been the case for me as well. I mean, we've built several features that we remove later because nobody's using them, and that's why I tell my colleagues that that's a failure on our part, because if we're building something that's not being used, then we haven't checked in with our users enough. And I think the rule of thumb here is to have a good starting idea, validate it to see, because people are really you can't ask a person what do you lack in your life, because they have no idea. They won't be able to tell you. So you have to use your brain to start off with, just give a platform, and then show your users something. Do you like this? And then they will, because that's a much easier question for them to answer. Yeah, I like this. This seems to be useful. And then you can ask them, okay, is there something missing from this thing that you have to give them something to start with. You can't give them a blank piece of paper. You have to give them something to start thinking about. And then they will say yes, that, oh yeah, these things, I would love to have these things. And then you say, and then you start going from there, because then now you're listening to your user. Or they say no, they have no idea. And then you evaluate and look, okay, is this good enough? If it's not good enough and you want to add more stuff, then you have to do your own thinking again, and then you do the whole charade over again, right? So make sure that you have a really good group of people who just want to like try out the application, and you have to be on them like a lot. You don't pressure them, but don't underestimate how important user feedback is. And because trust me, in the beginning, you're going to have to almost force people, or at least find a lot of people who are willing to help out, because until your application becomes really popular, that's going to be the hardest part for you. Having someone who builds the system is easy in comparison to having people who are willing for free or whatever to just give you some useful feedback. Trust me, that's what I've learned so far.